Baby by Benedict Bridgerton walks so Ilya Rozanov could run, motherfuckers! Hello, welcome back. In this episode of C is Horny on Main, we are once again going to talk about why the romance genre is so good and so necessary and so underrated, and we're going to do it through my latest hyperfixation, which is the show Heated Rivalry. Oh my god, guys, this show is so good. We're going to talk about all the ways that it's good, but truly, this show is so good on so many levels. The production value, clearly they didn't have as much money to work with as bigger budget shows, and it forces them to make some really good decisions. The cinematography is beautiful. The acting is fantastic, and the storyline, the narrative pacing, thus far, we're only 4 episodes in. It's only a 6-episode season because we are no longer God's favorite, but they're doing it so well. And I need to talk about it with somebody. So once upon a time, I used the topic of Bridgerton to Trojan horse a conversation about sex and sexuality and desire and how romance and readership of romance can help you cultivate and curate a much better and more interesting and more useful to the individual relationship to sex. Oh my God. Take everything I said about that show, multiply it times 100. The premises were these. This is based on a male-male sports romance of the same name by the author Rachel Reed. We have our protagonists. One is Shane Hollander. He is Canadian. He is like the wunderkind of his generation coming up. And we'll get into his personality and whatever later, but he's got some really, really specific defining traits. He is half Asian. His mother is an immigrant. He is the first player with that kind of background to reach the kind of prominence that he does. He is intense. He's incredibly intense, like pathologically so, and focused and wanting to deliver on the promise of his skills. Over here, we have Ilya Rozanov, the Russian wonderkin, kind of similar to Shane, but a very different personality. He is just as talented, but he is much more outgoing. He's much more aggressive. He's much less controlled in his way of approaching the sport than Shane is. And of course, he's got his reasons for that. He has a very different family situation. He has a very different cultural situation that he's coming from. And these two find each other. And over the course of, if you read the books, years, fall in love with one another. But as with all things, the romance is not based necessarily on the plot points, even though those are important and they do happen. The romance is based on the emotional journey of the main characters. And this show does it so, so well. You can tell that the people who made this show had it started by Jacob Tierney. They've all worked in television before. They know their subject matter. They are Canadian. They are hockey lovers. Jacob Tierney himself is gay. They know what they're doing with these storylines and these beats, but they're also just very technically skilled when it comes to the structural creation of a TV show. Episode 1 opens. We've got Shane and Ilya meeting at some kind of tournament when they are babies. They're teenagers. They're like 18 years old. I really like hockey romance, and it's because I don't know anything about hockey. So I can suspend all of my ignorance and disbelief because it's a sport I know nothing about, and so I don't have to care. They meet when they're 18. And the show does the world building around them and the character building and the stakes building so well and succinctly. We see very early on, that there's 2 different cultural tensions and pressures. Like I said, Shane is half Asian. He's the first person to kind of reach that level. We see that he has a very loving set of parents and a very stable family life, but that his mother in particular, who is herself an Asian immigrant, is really pushing him to succeed. She wants him to be a good role model. She knows that he's like cutting a path for other people, and she takes it that seriously, and she wants him to take that seriously. We've all known people with mothers like that. Meanwhile, in Old Country, we have Ilya, whose family life could not be more different. He does not have a stable home life. Again, the show has kind of teased this out with more information in every episode, but so I don't want to spoil anything that's in the books, but from what we know in the show, he has a real hard ass of a dad, I believe ex-military, who is carrying the burdens of post-Soviet breakdown and reorganization and order, and a really intense kind of Russian patriotism that he's trying to push on his son. Ilya's mother is dead. Again, go read the books. His father has remarried. He has a brother who is shown to be a drug addict, and his father is slowly deteriorating due to Alzheimer's. So Ilya, as the kind of breakout star of his family, is burdened with providing for his family, but being sponged off of by his brother and trying to care for a father who we know is a bad father and has never really supported him. Again, family, stakes, very different. These two guys are set up in their careers from the jump, from 18 years old. It's like, ooh, these two are the ones to watch. And so they are put into this kind of structured rivalry by politics, by family pressures, by the pressures of the sports world. The publicity narrative that gets crafted around them kind of forces them into rivalry and tension with one another. And then also, they have like a natural competition with one another. They both want to be the best. They're both very high-performing, high-achieving athletes. So, they're sizing one another up and they're like trying to figure things out. And we see very early, Shane, baby, the closet is glass. We see very early on that Shane is curious about and attracted to Ilya, and the visual styles and editing makes it clear that this is a closeted man. He wants, intimacy, and he's interested in sex, but he clearly does not have the experience, the language, or the skills, or anything to go about it. And he is such an uptight kind of ball of stress that he doesn't know what to do about it. Meanwhile, Ilya swings in, is like, you're hot, I want to fuck you. Guys, this show! Ilya is bisexual, and we meet him having already come to terms with his bisexuality. He's had a relationship with a man before, and this is so refreshing because often we see, bi panic in these kinds of media, but that's not what we're dealing with Ilya. Ilya is very sexually confident in a way that Shane isn't. You can tell, again, they're sizing each other up, they're intrigued by one another, and Ilya's character is such that he's much bolder, he's much more confident, and so he makes the move. Watch the show. And Shane goes for it. Poor baby boy. He's so stressed. He doesn't know what's going on, but he feels an attraction. He even tries to give Ilya an out after Ilya, comes on to him so forcibly. Not in a pressured way, though. I'll come back to that. Ilya just makes it clear that he wants to hook up with Shane. And Shane is stressed about it because he's never had an encounter like this before. And then he and Ilya have a hookup that is incredibly hot and is, again, the source of so much really good, quick communication, character building, and world building. We learn very quickly, Ilya's bi. He's okay with being bi. He has experience. Shane is attracted to men, clearly, and doesn't have any experience. They walk through what they're okay with, and they do it in a way that's extremely, extremely hot and steamy. but shows what good sexuality looks like, especially when you're younger and trying to explore it. They have this hookup. They part ways. They don't see each other for months because, again, in the sporting world, you know, they play in different teams, they play in different countries. The next time they see each other is at the draft, and they're both drafted into the NHL in North America. And then they start seeing more of each other. They play each other more regularly. There are moments of flirtation that build eventually to their next hookup when they start texting with one another. And then, of course, you know, over the course of many years, at a distance, they're in constant kind of textual communication with one another. And they use that as the way to hook up with each other whenever they can. Like, that's the plot, right? That's the plot. The joy is in the stakes. Again, this show does such a good job of showing the stakes. What is at stake for these characters? The sports world is still aggressively heteronormative and aggressively masculine. Some sports are getting better at gay and bisexual players than others. Apparently, hockey is not one of them. So we know going into that, you know, this is the pressures of the sporting world, the pressures of the masculine gaze of sports, and, you know, how people, you know, emotionally connect to it. We also know that, you know, professional sports is an incredibly high performance career. It comes with physical stress on the body. It comes with mental stress, emotional strain. It's a profession, and it's a very, very high performing profession. And it's a highly public profession. This is a tangent, but something that I think about quite a bit in our current age of media and sports is how often we treat professional athletes like gladiators. And I don't mean that as a compliment. I mean that as we treat professional athletes as people whose bodies can be thrown against one another and beaten up and harmed and often broken for our entertainment pleasure. The life of a professional, the professional life of a professional athlete is typically not very long. It's rare to have a long career. It's kind of like the dance world. It's very intense, very early, and it ends before most people. Put a pin in that. So we have the pressures of publicity. We also see the pressures of representation. Shane, being half Asian and the first person to kind of reach that level, feels community pressure and family pressure and internally created pressure to not fuck this up, to be the good role model and to, you know, cut a path for others. Ilya feels the pressure for playing on behalf of his country and feeling that kind of patriotic pressure intensified by his parents. Episode 2 actually takes us to the Olympics, which in Sochi, Russia. And so we see, you know, those political rivalries play out and how people can be, I love this metaphor, on multiple teams at the same time. You know, you as an American might have a Canadian player on your professional team for one game, and then you might be playing against each other in the Olympics if your countries go up one another. The idea of, you know, switching teams and switching perspectives and switching allegiances is subtext in the show, but it's incredibly intelligent subtext. Then there's shame. Let's talk about shame. Shame around sexuality, it will shock you to hear, is a really big problem. I really like that this show doesn't focus on shame, however. I think a lot of queer-based media when I was growing up was much more shame-focused because the culture was much more shaming. We've come a long way, not fucking far enough. Shame in this sense is not I don't mean in that these characters feel shamed. They just feel pressured by the demands of their job, the cultural expectations of their sport, other cultural expectations around them, cultural expectations of masculinity and manhood in a hyper athletic, high performance field. It's clear that they have internalized shame, some of them, or, you know, at least confusion, and they don't know what to do about it. It really is interesting. I love that, you know, he is the bisexual character because obviously Russia is not queer friendly at all. And this is addressed in the text of the show. You know, he's not flagrantly out in Russia. He's not flagrantly out in North America either. He's just very self-aware, shall we say, about who he does and doesn't want to sleep with. Shane has to come to an appreciation that Ilya faces these other dangers and pressures that he doesn't. Is another example of the world building and the structure of the show and how these two characters face different kinds of pressures and burdens. So episode 2 focuses on, you know, building their relationship, the pressures that keep them together, the pressures that make it so that they can't connect more deeply. And it's so intelligently done. Again, this show moves through time very quickly. You know, there's multiple time jumps, be months or years. This is a slow burn in that respect. And I think that they do it in such a way that they show the characters starting to grow up. They show, you know, them succeeding in their careers. We see time pass. But the thing that kind of remains constant is this connection that they have to each other, but that they don't feel able or are not in the circumstances to fully explore. And I think that is really important, you know, jumping ahead a bit to the queer experience, because depending on who you are and your circumstances, it can take, and usually does take, years to feel and to be safe, to be what and who you are, and to love who you love. Again, it's subtext, but the way that the show is constructed and edited is perfectly done. Now, episode 3 is interesting because we take a bit of a break from the Shane and Ilya build up in tension. We see them, you know, connect very early on as young men and, you know, this connection that they had that's building. And then suddenly we get a bottle episode, we get a standalone, we get the story of a totally different hockey player named Scott Hunter. Scott is older than Shane and Ilya. He's coming towards the end of his career. So in athlete terms, you know, he's in his 30s, maybe approaching his 40s. He's at a different place. But he is also a gay man, and he's not out for all of the same kind of pressures. And we see him fall in love with somebody, and how they do and don't try to navigate being in a closeted relationship. And I love this episode so much. It's such a good standalone episode. It reminds me of the Last of Us episode, where we kind of took a break from the main characters to focus on this apocalypse gay couple. Like, it's very similar to that. Side note, this whole show also reminds me a lot of Normal People, the BBC adaptation of Sally Rooney's novel. Maybe I'll come back to that. And the reason I like it is because through the experience of Scott Hunter, we once again understand what the stakes are for these younger men. We see that Scott, you know, is still protecting his career. He has people who depend on him. He doesn't feel like he can take that kind of step. He has shuttered this part of his life and is waiting for his hockey career to end before he can do anything about it, which has made him incredibly lonely. Who'da thunk? And then into his life comes this adorable cinnamon roll of a guy who is not from the sports world at all, is, you know, from like trying to pursue his academic career, you know, working an hourly wage job, but he's just lovely. He's this lovely, nice guy who Scott connects with, and they flirt, and then they, you know, connect, and then they hook up, and then they start dating, but it's all in secret. Eventually, the pressures of secrecy make the relationship untenable. The contrast. Ilya and Shane are young. They're young bucks. They're at the start of this journey. Scott is closer to the end, and he still hasn't figured it out yet. Shane and Ilya are clearly coming of age, more in the millennial or maybe slightly younger cohort. Shane is older. He's, you know, been alive when don't ask, don't tell was a thing. He's seen gay marriage come around, but it's still not okay, you know, in his world. Like, he has a different set of experiences and perspectives and traumas that he is dealing with. By showcasing these two stories, we see what the stakes would be for someone like Shane and Ilya, but we get this standalone, beautiful story. And again, it's the contrast. We are shown that Kip, the guy that Scott falls in love with, has a kind of awkward and bumbling, but very, very dear and sweet father who loves him. Kip has community. He has friends who care deeply about him and who are protective of him and want him to be happy, and don't want him to feel, you know, shamed and closeted in any way. They want him to be thriving. Whereas Scott is shown, his parents have passed, hockey's kind of all he has, his role, his career. He doesn't have that support system. He doesn't have that community. He is so isolated, and that informs his decisions and his choices. And, you know, golly, like, episode 3, I'm not seeing as much love for it online as the others because it's not, you know, the Shane and Ilya story. But I think it was so smart to take this bottle episode to show the stakes. What's at stake? The loneliness, the need of community and the need for safety, and how it simply doesn't exist in this world. So that when we pivot back to our main boys, we understand more of the world and the stakes and the pressures because we've seen it from someone else. I think it just heightens the empathy a ton. Something else that I really like that this show does in terms of stakes and world building is the differences in the family. Shane, as I've said, has a very, very high pressure mom, but his parents clearly love him. They want good things for him. They have pushed him to be successful. But we get through the dialogue that Shane has a very close relationship to his parents. He feels safe with them in most ways, you know, not all, but he feels loved and supported by his parents. And we get, you know, the clips of dialogue where he clearly doesn't understand that Ilya doesn't have the same relationship to home that he does. Ilya hates going home. It is not a place of joy or refuge or safety for him. And it takes Shane a while to figure that out because they have different bundles of experiences. One family is very healthy and high performing, and one family is dealing with disease and sickness and addiction. They could not be more different, and yet they both feel incredibly lonely in their own way. And again, I think the Scott Kip episode emphasizes and sets up that idea of loneliness incredibly beautifully and incredibly powerfully. Episode 4, which is the last one to have come out, is just one emotional arson attack after another. Oh my God. This episode is kind of the culmination of all of these challenges where after years of flirting and after years of hooking up, and years of getting to know one another better, Ilya and Shane start connecting more on a deeper level, and it freaks them the fuck out. It sends them off in different doom spirals. There is a fantastic sequence of, you know, them being together after a hookup and just being domestic and hanging out, talking about their jobs. And what you see in that, there's a recurring theme of Ilya constantly referring to Shane as boring because he's uptight, he's controlled, you know, and he's not a wild child. And it's clear that Ilya craves that. That sense of safety and domesticity is so clearly missing, and he so clearly gets it when he's around Shane. Shane, meanwhile, on the other hand, we see is, you know, very driven, very fulfilled, very supportive, but he's also starved for affection and for touch. And he gets that from Ilya. And this sequence, you know, shows them kind of sharing what the other person needs, providing the things that the other person needs, it's done in very cute and subtle ways. So for example, Shane is constantly trying to find ginger ale and, doesn't always get it when he goes to the club or when he's out for lunch or something. But when he goes over to Ilya's house to hook up, Ilya has it for him. No questions asked. It's just ready. Ilya just tosses it to him effectively. Ilya sees him and has noticed him and notices the things that he wants and loves and needs. Shane is not as perceptive as Ilya. I love Shane. I love Shane as a character. I relate to Ilya a bit more for his particular bundle of I think traumas and experiences. But we see time and time again, that Ilya kind of takes the next first step. He's the first one to flirt with Shane. He's the one to exchange numbers. He's the one to initiate things like cuddling. He's the one to actually, in this episode, ask the question, are you into girls at all? Because I never hear about you with them. And poor Shane, again, sweetie, the closet is glass. But, Shane tries to deflect. He's like, no, well, I keep a lot of things private. I don't talk about it. And Ilya's like, I like girls. Shane, poor baby, is like, yeah, I know. And Ilya just matter-of-factly says, but I also like you. And he's just, for being, Russian, and for being a character who's kind of incredibly intense, Ilya has a degree of more emotional intelligence than Shane does. And the great conflict, because there's always a conflict in romance, and this is the great theme of the show so far, I think, is this clash of communication. They're still learning how to communicate with one another. They come from different cultures. They come from different languages. They come from different experiences. And even this intense draw that they have to one another is not easily overcome. They have to overcome it. Overcoming the challenge is the joy of the romance genre. But, as this scene kind of plays out, Ilya's just matter of fact about the fact that he wants Shane. He likes him. He's attracted to him. And Shane feels safe enough to kind of have this gentle intimacy with Ilya where they cuddle. Of course, it turns into other things. And then Shane freaks out. He freaks out and he flees because the stakes have been raised. He's not confronted his own sexuality fully in the way that Ilya has. This wasn't just about sex either. This was a moment of intimacy. And he does not know what to do with it. And we see this beautiful kind of moment of heartbreak where Ilya's, asking him to stay in this very controlled, very Russian way. But as we've peeled back the layers of Ilya, the boy is a yearner. The boy can yearn. He pines. He just doesn't show it in the way that other people recognize. It's heartbreaking. Shane goes on, they part ways for several months. Shane actually ends up kind of quasi-dating a girl, which sends Ilya into a spiral of jealousy. And it, of course, guys, we've all been here, right? It turns out he's just really good friends with this girl and they really bond about shared experiences. She's an actress. She has a high publicity job. She's in a very demanding field where she's under a lot of scrutiny. They just connect with one another in a way that is not sexual, but is deeply loving. Again, maybe I'll rant about that. But that's the character of Rose. Over here, I should probably mention, Ilya also has a female friend and fuck buddy, who he's shown to care about very deeply. And actually in the conversation that he had with Shane, where they were talking or starting to tease out sexuality, so one of the more meaningful bits of dialogue is that, Ilya says, oh yeah, I've got Svetlana, she's great, we fuck sometimes. But he says, he goes on to say that that's not really enough for him. Again, the contrast, the tension. Shane is a man who doesn't know how to ask for what he wants. He has so many questions about what he wants. Ilya doesn't have those problems. Ilya is not lonely the way that Shane is lonely. Shane has family. Shane has career aspirations and goals. Shane has a team who respects him, but he is emotionally, romantically, deeply lonely. Ilya has good friends. He has a terrible family, but he has good friends. He's shown to be highly respected by his team. He clearly enjoys his life, but he's lonely for connection. You know, he has fuck buddies. He's not starved for sex in the way that I think that Shane is. But he doesn't have a person. And that's, you know, something that he wants. So in that conversation, he even refers to, oh yeah, you know, Svetlana's great. Love having sex with her, but I think I need to find someone else because it's not enough for him anymore. You get me? Anyway, the girls and the gays, we love it. We love to see it. So again, like these are the kind of things that I'm thinking about so much of this show. And for me, at least, you know, kind of what the core themes are coming down to. One is the idea of intimacy. And I don't just mean sexual. There are a lot of ways to be intimate with people. You can be intimate with family members if you trust them to be safe for you, or you can be denied intimacy from family members if you don't have that trust. Some friends provide the intimacy of community and safety, and some people don't have that. There is the emotional intimacy of romance. There is the sexual intimacy of intimacy. All of these things are not the same thing. They're all important and they're in different ways though. And I really like that this show touches on intimacy of a lot of different kinds being important and being a thing that is okay and in fact normal and necessary to want. And how being denied it can make even other forms of success look and feel incredibly hollow. You know, I think that the flip side to intimacy is loneliness, and all of the main characters who we see in the show are lonely in different ways. Just as it's possible to be intimate in different ways, it's possible to be lonely in different ways. I really like that dichotomy. I also really like the theme of communication. Language in this show is so important. There's a lot of, you know, online froth about, oh my God, why can't these boys just have a conversation? That's the point. They have a language barrier. They have an experience barrier. They have a cultural barrier. They have a publicity barrier. They have a rivalry barrier. They literally don't have the language to talk about what they need to talk about with one another. Ilya is shown struggling with English. It's not his first language. And there's wonderful moments of bonding over that. Shane doesn't have the experiences that Ilya's have to give him the language about his own sexual desires and wants. He has to figure it out and kind of stumble through it in some ways. Not having the words to describe what you want or what you need is so fundamental to this show. We see it in society. We see it in coupleships. We see it in culturally, we see it linguistically. Like communication and the lack thereof is so thematic in this show. So anytime I see someone go like, oh, why don't they just speak? I want to be like, they can't. Ilya doesn't have the language and Shane doesn't have the words. and the fact that it's a process to develop this language, to develop these skills, to develop the connection and the opportunity and the safety to have those kind of talks and to tease that out from one another, that is what breeds intimacy. That is what creates the space for that. And this show just lays that all out, and it shows, not tells, so gorgeously. I love the dichotomies about how these two characters want very different things. Ilya clearly craves a degree of safety and security, which is odd because, you know, he's this, you know, kind of brasher sort of character, but all of that orbits a very, very tender kind of center, which is like the acting in the show is incredibly well done. I think the two boys doing this, I hope they get long careers out of this because I think they're doing some amazing work. It's hilarious seeing them on their press tours and their actual personalities versus actors. I know that's a weird thing to say about actors, like, oh my goodness, you're so different than your character. No shit, Sherlock. But like, truly. When I look at Connor Story, the actor who plays Ilya, he looks different as Ilya than he does to me, like as Connor. Like the way that he holds himself and carries himself, he embodies that character so well. Shane is played by an actor named Hudson Williams. Exact same thing. Shane is this uptight, kind of rigid, neurotic sort of character. Hudson is like this theater kid peacock. It's so fun to watch. Anyway, we love people who are good at what they do. Ilya, you know, having this very, very tender center, but not having the cultural or experiential language to kind of communicate that need is heartbreaking to watch. And Shane having this like this discipline and this rigidity and this neuroticism, but like desperately needing connection is equally heartbreaking to watch. Totally different characters, totally different sets of desires and needs, beautifully portrayed. And yes, we need to talk about the sex. This is a steamy series, my God. But I mentioned this was a lot like Normal People, the BBC adaptation. That was also a steamy show that did very explicit sex scenes in a way that matters, because sex and violence can be gratuitous or they can be part of the point and the plot in a way that makes narrative sense, is thematically appropriate, is actually well written and built into the concept and the structure and the production of the show, and still be fun to watch. Like, don't get me wrong, this is a spice positive space, people. Sexuality is shown as being another, you know, layer to intimacy and communication. And this is so important and ties back to my Bridgerton rant from like a year and change ago. Sex is not just one thing. It's not just insertion. Sex is bundles of activity. It is any number of combinations of body parts and any like there's this heteronormative toxic idea, you know, that sex is only P in V, or gay sex is only, not sure I can actually say that on YouTube, but like, which is a problem, but like that there's only one kind of way to have gay sex. And there isn't just one kind of way to have any kind of sex. This show shows these boys to start, and then men, growing in their sexuality. Their hookups start, you know, with some acts and not others. They progress to other acts. They talk about it. Ilya, the more experienced partner, is shown like asking for Shane, you know, are you okay with this? Is this what you want? Like, again, in a way that doesn't take you out of the plot, because it's part of the plot. It's part of the point. Shane is shown growing into more sexual confidence, at least with Ilya, because of this back and forth. And their relationship and their intimacy and their communication and their sexuality progress together in the same way. There are stages, there are phases, there are things that you learn about yourself along the way. And I stand by what I said before. Romance as a genre is one of the best ways, the best forms of media to explore inner worlds in this way. Romance is about the process of finding another person and coming together with that person. Romance is about finding another person and coming together with that person, negotiating the relationship with that person, figuring out what it looks like, what it doesn't look like. There are tropes in romance about each of these stages and phases that matter, and I think are some of the best models of what good, healthy, developing sexuality could look like. In this case, especially for queer people. Bi people exist. Bi men exist. Most of the time that they're shown is not what we're getting on this show. And I love what we're getting on this show. I think that more men, specifically straight men, need to read romance. I do. Like, this is one of the hills I will die on. More men need to read romance. Number one, because most men don't read enough from a traditionally female perspective. Number two, most men are not, I would say, socialized to appreciate the internal journey stories that feature in female or female gaze based writing and literature. And I don't think most men are at all properly educated about what the people they want to sleep with may actually want or how to get there. Now, don't get me wrong, there are straight men. We're doing great. Like, actually, no, you're kind of in your flop era, but straight men. Straight men who, like, there's a certain kind of straight man who refuses to read the IKEA instructions. You know what I'm saying? It is a point of pride for them that they will never touch the IKEA instructions because they can do it by themselves. And that's how I kind of feel about straightness overall, and definitely about romance and queer romance. And like there is a difference in the caliber of man who reads the instruction manual and the man who doesn't. Like, if you're building the IKEA cabinet and you don't read the instruction manual, if you refuse to read the instruction manual, you might get a cabinet. It might stand up, it might work, but there's a good chance that there's parts left over, right? Like, and that you're not quite sure what that screw was for. And maybe this whole thing could come tumbling down, and maybe it'll stay up. Maybe you nailed it on your first try. Good for you. But there's a really good chance that you didn't. Men who don't read romance are missing out. And more broadly, I think that people who don't ever touch or read queer romance, same thing. You might be missing a few screws, baby. All of the puns intended. Like, one of the points of fiction is to allow the reader to experience what they have not themselves experienced, to cultivate an emotional awareness and reckoning and embodiment of feelings that you have not and might not ever directly experience. But it creates an empathy. And it creates, if you're doing it right, a curiosity. And again, I'm not just talking about sex. This is what good fiction does. But I wish more men read romance fiction because I think it would help them with women. We know that there is a male loneliness crisis. I'm going to throw you back to my thesis that the cure for loneliness is intimacy, and I don't mean sex. I mean it is relational. It is the ways that you learn to connect with another person, of which sex is one and a very important one, but it's not the only one. Intimacy can be friendships. Intimacy can be community. Intimacy can be teammates. Intimacy can be colleagues. Intimacy can be family. Intimacy can be chosen family. Intimacy can be love without desire. It's not just one thing. Romance shows people how to be intimate. And again, I'm not talking about sex. Everyone also needs to read queer love stories for the exact same reason, or just queer fiction generally. If you yourself don't identify as queer, you still need to cultivate empathy and perspective of what that experience is like. And who knows, you may find out something about yourself. Wouldn't be the first time. So in the end, like with all things romance or spice, the spice is fun. The spice is enjoyable and you should enjoy it. But you shouldn't mistake the spiciness for the lack of wholesomeness or just the good TV. Again, this show, clearly done on some budgeting constraints, is very well done. The cinematography, the music choices, the editing, the way that they move through time, the way that they world build and they stakes build. This is good TV writ large. I think you're missing out if you skip the spicy scenes, but again, that's just me. I'm a pervert. But even if you have not read much queer media, even if you have not read romance, even if you're not a sports person, this show might be worth it. Now, I have read the books. I think I know what's coming because thus far, the team doing the show, okay, side note again, they clearly love their source material and they respect their source material. They are hyping up the author. The interviews that they're doing are so lovely and wholesome. Like the two actors are talking about like, I had no idea this kind of genre existed in this way. Like, oh wow, women like smut. Yes, sweet child, we do. But they're nailing it on the press tour, being like, you know, what they think is appealing about this show is the yearning. Golly, yearning is hot. Yearning and craving and desire and needs. Again, these are not all the same things. And I think so much normal, regular, male gazy media boils it all down to the same thing. I think our discourse around men boils it all down to the same thing. And it's not. It's just not. These are all different needs. These are all different drives. This show, only 4 episodes in out of 6, is taking the viewership on that journey in such an intelligent way, in such an emotionally savvy way, in such a satisfying way. Like, if you know anything about romance is about the happily for now or the happily ever after. The joy is in the process of getting to it. They've already announced that there's going to be another season, which is fantastic because this is a whole series. The author, Rachel Reed, has built a whole world around this. If you've not given romance a shot, dive in. If you've not given romance a shot, if you've not given sports romance a shot, and if you've not given same-sex romance a shot, this is a great series. If you've not given any of these genres or subgenres a chance, you should. And if this is not even your normal kind of TV, push the boat out maybe if you're comfortable with spice and steam. I know not everyone is, but I think we should be more comfortable with it as a general rule. Like, things can be spicy and also be wholesome. Things can be explicit and also instructive. Things can be sexy and also really satisfying. This is such a good show, guys. I'm annoyed that there's only 2 more episodes. Having read the books, I think I know what's coming in them, and the adaptation thus far has been, again, very faithful, very respectful. Like, clearly they wanted to adapt this story. Like, they're not making huge changes to it. But even if you know what the beats are, and even if you're familiar enough with romance to guess, the satisfaction is real, kids. This show is worth your time. This genre is worth your time. So if you haven't given it a shot, you should. And I'll probably have another one of these crash outs after the season ends. So check back in for that. And in the meantime, go read something smutty. It's good for you.